They told me to forget, to forgive. But how do you forgive a lifetime of pain? Pain that's etched into your very bones, woven into the fabric of your existence. How do you forgive when every corner of your heart still remembers the scars, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the moments when you thought you would never see the light again? For years I tried. I tried to let go, to move forward, to believe that I could heal. But the truth is, you can't just erase the past, no matter how hard you try. It doesn't work that way. The weight of it lingers, always just beneath the surface, waiting to remind you of what you've been through. But here I am, standing in front of you, not as the broken girl I once was, but as a woman who learned to survive, a woman who found her strength, even when I thought there was nothing left. I'm a grandmother now, yes, but I'm more than that. I'm a warrior, a survivor, and I have a story to tell. I've spent years reflecting on my life, the quiet days now, the peace I've fought so hard to find. I live in a small house, surrounded by the hum of life outside my window, the laughter of children playing in the park, the sound of birds singing in the trees. It's a far cry from the life I once knew, a life that was filled with fear, with trauma, with the constant fight to stay alive. The past seems so distant now, yet there are days when it comes rushing back. When the silence of my home is pierced by memories I wish I could forget. Those memories are not just mine anymore. They belong to my children, my grandchildren, to the family I've built from the ashes of what was once a broken life. But even now, when the evening light fades and the world grows quiet, I feel the weight of what I've lived through. You see, I wasn't always this calm woman you see before you. I wasn't always the one with the gentle smile and the steady steps. I was once a scared girl, trapped in a world I didn't understand. A world where survival meant more than living. I had to fight, not just for my life, but for my soul. For years I carried a burden so heavy, I didn't know how I could keep going, but somehow I did. And in that fight, something changed. I changed. I discovered that survival wasn't just about breathing, about getting through another day. It was about reclaiming my power, my voice, and my future. I had to become something I never thought I could be. Strong, resilient, unbreakable. But it wasn't easy. It never is. The road from where I started to where I am now is filled with heartbreak, with moments I wish I could forget, but also moments that shaped me into the woman I am today. This is the story of how I became who I am, of how I went from being a victim to finding my redemption, my peace. It's not just my story. It's the story of anyone who's ever felt lost, anyone who's ever felt like they couldn't go on. It's a story of healing, of hope, and of finding your way back to yourself when the world has tried to break you. So sit with me for a while. Let me tell you how it all began. The journey of a girl who fought to survive, and the woman who learned to forgive. I was born in a small town, nestled in the quiet hills, where everyone knew everyone else's business. A town so small, you could walk from one end to the other in under an hour. The streets were lined with old oak trees, their branches twisted and gnarled like the secrets that people kept. It was a place where life moved slowly, where the same people went to the same church every Sunday, where family and faith were the heart of everything. For most, it was a peaceful, safe place, but for me, it became a prison. My family lived in a modest house on the edge of town, just far enough from the center that you could hear the church bells on Sundays, but not much else. The walls were thin, the floors creaky. I could always hear my mother's soft hums as she worked, the sound of my father's footsteps as he came and went. My mother, a woman of great kindness, was the heart of our home. She would always tell me that family was everything, that love was unconditional, and that faith could carry us through anything. And my father, well, he was a man of faith too. I suppose that's where the problem began. He was a quiet man, steadfast in his beliefs, with a deep devotion to the church. His days began at dawn with prayer, and his nights often ended that way too. We didn't have much in terms of material things, but we had God, and my father made sure that we understood that. Everything we have is because of Him, he would say, his voice steady and firm, as though that were the answer to every question we had in life. I believed him, like a child believes everything they are told. It wasn't until later that I realized how deeply his faith was tied to something darker, something that would shatter my world. But back then, I trusted him completely. He was my father, and I believed every word he spoke. I believed the stories he told me about how God had a plan for each of us, how we were meant to endure whatever hardships came our way. His word was law in our house, and everyone else knew it. At church, he was a pillar of the community, a man whose dedication to the Lord was unquestionable. It was in that church where I first met Father Cole, the new priest in town. He came with a reputation that preceded him, a man of great faith, someone who had special gifts from God. He had the kind of charisma that made you want to listen, made you believe he was divinely chosen. And my father, well, he was drawn to him instantly. Father Cole quickly became a regular guest at our home, and my father's admiration for him grew. I didn't know much about priests back then, but I trusted my father's judgment. When Father Cole praised me for my dedication during Sunday school, for my eagerness to help with the church's duties, I felt proud. I believed I was doing something good, something that pleased God. I didn't know that I was being groomed for something far darker. Looking back, I see the signs now, the small moments that should have raised red flags. But as a child, you don't know how to read those signs. You just trust. You trust the people who are supposed to take care of you, protect you. You trust them to do what's right. It started slowly. A simple request here, a little compliment there. "You're such a good girl, Charlotte," he would say, his hand resting a little too long on my shoulder. "God has a special plan for you." I didn't understand what he meant by that, but I felt special. As the weeks went on, the visits became more frequent. Father Cole would come by after Mass, sometimes alone, sometimes with other members of the congregation, and it was always the same. My father would smile and talk to his friends while I would be tasked with running errands or helping Father Cole with various church duties. I didn't think much of it at first. He was a priest, after all. What harm could he do? But then the tasks began to change. They became more personal. The help turned into something else entirely. At first, it was just asking me to stay after hours, to help him clean the rectory. It wasn't unusual, or so I thought. He would always tell me how lucky I was to be chosen, how God had entrusted me with such an important responsibility. The first time it happened, I didn't understand. I froze when he touched me, when his hand lingered too long on my arm. I didn't know what to say or what to do. I had been taught to respect priests, to respect authority, to never question them. I thought maybe I was imagining things, maybe I was being too sensitive. But over time, the touches became more frequent. His whispers grew more intimate. "You're a good girl, Charlotte. You're helping me so much," he would say, his breath warm against my ear. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it didn't feel right. I knew that something in my gut was telling me to run, to scream, but I didn't. I stayed silent. I didn't want to disappoint my father, who was so proud of me, so proud that I was helping the priest, so proud of the special relationship I had with him. And it wasn't just the physical touch that hurt. It was the manipulation, the control. He made me feel like I owed him something, like I was part of his mission, like I was a key player in a grand plan that I didn't understand. His words were so sweet, so convincing, and my mind was so young, so impressionable. At home, I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but I couldn't. My father believed in Father Cole so much. He trusted him like a brother. How could I tell him that the man he admired, the man he had brought into our home, had hurt me? How could I betray him like that? But there was something inside me, a small flicker of resistance, that began to grow. I didn't know it then, but it was the first sign that I wasn't completely broken. The first sign that I was still capable of fighting back, even if I didn't have the words to express it. One night, after another unwanted touch, I locked myself in the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't the same girl who had trusted so blindly before. Something inside me had shifted. I didn't know how to fight back, but I knew I didn't want to be a part of this anymore. I wasn't his to control. I wasn't anyone's to use. I don't know what kept me going, what made me keep putting one foot in front of the other, but I did. Maybe it was the thought of escaping, or the tiny sliver of hope that I could one day leave it all behind. Or maybe it was because deep down, I knew that somehow, some way, I would survive this. And that was when I made a decision, though I didn't know it yet. I would fight. Not physically, not yet. But in every moment I stood up for myself. Every time I didn't let him see how much he was hurting me. I was fighting. I wasn't broken yet. I wasn't going to let him break me completely. At that moment, I began to understand something vital. Survival didn't mean just enduring the pain. It meant finding the strength to keep living in the face of it. And so, I kept going, one day at a time, even though the weight of it all was heavy. Even though the scars were beginning to mark my soul, I kept moving forward, because I wasn't done. Not yet. The day I realized the full extent of my betrayal didn't come in a flash of clarity. It wasn't some dramatic moment where everything fell into place all at once. No. It crept up on me slowly, like a storm gathering in the distance, until one day it broke with a force I couldn't ignore. I was just 13, but already I felt older than my years. I had learned how to hold my silence, how to hide my pain behind a smile, how to go along with things that felt wrong because I had been taught that this was my place. This was how I would serve, how I would make my father proud, how I would keep the family together. But even in the deepest corners of my heart, I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. The realization didn't come when Father Cole first crossed the line. It came when he crossed it again, and then again, and again. Each time the betrayal felt deeper, more suffocating. Every time his hands lingered too long, every time he whispered about God's plan and how I was chosen, I told myself it was my fault. I was told it was special. I was told I was helping. But deep down I knew that's not what this was. This wasn't about helping. This wasn't about God. This was about power, control, and a man using me for his twisted needs. The first time I tried to fight it off, I froze. My body betrayed me, but the second time I didn't. The second time I understood the game for what it was. Father Cole's kind eyes no longer seemed holy. They seemed calculating. He was manipulating me, the man who had made me believe that he was acting in God's name, the man who I had been told was above reproach, was a predator, and I was his prey. That was the moment I stopped being a child. It was a cold afternoon when it all came crashing down. I had spent the day running errands for him, things I had done 1,000 times before. But this time the air felt heavier. As I walked back to the rectory, my heart started to race. There was an unease in my chest, a pressure I couldn't shake. When I stepped inside, the house seemed too quiet. Father Cole was sitting in his chair by the window, his eyes locked on me as I entered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. My stomach twisted as he slowly rose from his chair and walked towards me. My legs felt like they were made of stone, but I couldn't move. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low, almost soothing. "You're so special, you know that, don't you?" I nodded even though my insides were screaming. His hand reached out, brushing my hair behind my ear, and for the first time, I saw the dark gleam in his eyes that I had been too blind to see before. He wasn't a man of God anymore. He was something else, something evil, In that moment, a cold rage surged inside me. It was a rage I had never felt before, raw and unfiltered. This was no longer about being a victim. This was about fighting for my life, and in that instant, I knew that I couldn't let him do this to me anymore. I couldn't let him control me, manipulate me, make me feel like I had no choice but to serve him. The anger boiled inside me, hot and fierce. It wasn't just the anger of a scared little girl anymore. It was the anger of someone who had been betrayed, someone who had had her innocence stolen, her voice silenced for far too long. And now, I could feel the walls inside me cracking open, piece by piece, until all that was left was the determination to survive. From that moment on, everything changed. I knew I could no longer sit in silence. I knew I couldn't allow myself to be manipulated any longer. But the hardest part was realizing that I wasn't just fighting against Father Cole. I was fighting against my own father, my family, and everything I had been raised to believe. How could I explain this to anyone? How could I make them understand that the man they trusted, the man who had been a pillar of our community, was a predator? But I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't let this happen to me. I had already lost too much. I had already given up too much of myself. It was the smallest act of defiance that sparked the change. One night, after Father Cole had crossed the line again, I stopped pretending. When he leaned in, I stood still. But inside, I wasn't the same. I wasn't the frightened girl who had frozen the first time. This time I looked at him, and I saw him for what he really was. A monster. I wasn't going to let him have power over me anymore. I couldn't fight back physically. Not yet. But my mind was sharp, and I was learning to use it. I began to plan. Each time he looked at me with those cold eyes, I didn't shrink. I didn't cower. I made myself believe that I could survive this, that somehow I could break free. In my mind, I started to create a strategy. Every time he touched me, every time he manipulated me, I stored the details away. I wrote them down in my journal, each word more of a weapon in my fight. I started to plan for the moment when I would be ready to expose him, when I would be able to tell the truth, and when I could finally break the chains that had bound me. I wasn't just going to survive anymore. I was going to take back my life. One night, after a particularly brutal encounter, I made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was done being controlled. I was done hiding in the shadows of fear and shame. The next day, I began preparing myself, mentally and physically, for what I was about to do. I knew that I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to save me. I couldn't keep hoping that my father would wake up, that someone would see the truth. I had to be the one to make it stop. I started small. I began to gather evidence. Every time Father Cole let something slip, every time he gave me a look that made my skin crawl, I wrote it down. I began to keep track of the times he came to see me, the moments he tried to touch me, the things he said that made it clear he was using me. At the same time, I began to distance myself from him. I didn't engage with him the way I used to. I didn't laugh at his jokes. I didn't respond to his compliments. I didn't let him get close. And the more I pushed back, the more I could feel the power shift inside me. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew there would be consequences, that my father would never believe me, that the town would never believe me. But I had a plan, and it was time to put it into action. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't the kind of hope I had once had, the naive hope that people would do the right thing, that I could rely on others to protect me. No, this was the hope of someone who knew she had the power to change her own fate. Tomorrow, I would take the first step. And no matter what happened, I would fight. I would make them see the truth. I would make them listen. And no one would ever take advantage of me again. I knew the moment had come. It wasn't something I had planned for, not in the way you'd imagine. I had been preparing myself for weeks, for months even. gathering the courage and the evidence, ready to stand up and fight. But I didn't expect it to happen like this. It was late in the evening, just as the last rays of sunlight were slipping behind the horizon. The air was thick with humidity, but the weight in my chest felt heavier than any summer heat. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling, as I made my way to the rectory for what I knew was going to be my final meeting with Father Cole. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to face him, to look him in the eye, to hear those lies fall from his lips once more. But I had no choice. It had to happen tonight. I had to confront him. I had to take back the control he had stolen from me all these years. When I arrived, I stood at the door for a long moment, my fingers wrapped around the cool brass handle, unsure if I was strong enough to face what was waiting for me on the other side. But in that moment of doubt, something deep inside me stirred, a quiet strength that I had discovered in the months leading up to this moment. I wasn't the frightened girl who had walked into that house years ago. I wasn't the same person I had been when this nightmare began. I opened the door. Father Cole was sitting in his chair, just like he always did, his eyes flickering with that false warmth he had perfected over the years. "Charlotte," he said, smiling as though we were still friends, as though I hadn't been living in hell every time I came to see him. "I've been waiting for you. We need to talk." I closed the door behind me, my heart racing. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I stood tall, my hands shaking at my sides, but my resolve unshaken. "We do," I said, my voice steady, though I could feel the adrenaline beginning to course through my veins. "We need to talk about what you've been doing to me." His smile faltered for the briefest moment, but it quickly returned, almost too quickly, as if he were trying to cover up something that had been exposed. "I don't know what you mean, Charlotte. You've always been such a good girl." His voice was smooth, honeyed, but I could see the tension in his shoulders now. He knew something was different, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger, louder. "You don't get to use me anymore. You don't get to manipulate me to control me. You don't get to hide behind your collar and pretend that this is something holy. It's not. It never was." I could see the shift in his expression now. Something darker, something more dangerous. His eyes narrowed, and his posture stiffened. "You don't know what you're saying, child," he hissed, his calm veneer cracking. "You've been chosen for something greater than you can understand." "Chosen?" I laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was bitter, full of years of resentment. "Chosen to be your pawn? Chosen to be your victim?" I felt something surge inside me then. Anger, yes, but also something else. A clarity I hadn't felt before. A sense of purpose. I reached into my bag, pulling out the small folded notebook I had been hiding for months, the evidence I had painstakingly documented. His eyes flickered to it, and in that brief moment of hesitation, I saw the fear in his eyes. "You thought I wouldn't remember," I said, "that I wouldn't fight back. But I've been writing everything down. Every time you touched me, every lie you told me, every night I spent alone, terrified while you preyed on me. And I kept it all, every word, every date, every detail. It's all here." I held the notebook out in front of him, my hands no longer trembling, but steady, unwavering. He took a step back, his face now a mask of fury. "You don't know what you're doing," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "If you think anyone will believe you over me, you're a fool. I have power here, more than you could ever understand." In that moment, I understood the truth of it, the thing I had been too afraid to admit for so long. He wasn't just a man of God. He was a man of power, and he used that power to keep people like me silent. He had used my father's trust, my mother's silence, and my own innocence to manipulate and control me. But not anymore. "I'm done being your pawn," I said. And I'm done being afraid. The words felt like a release, like a dam breaking inside me. I had spent years wondering if I could ever stand up to him, if I could ever find the strength to stop what was happening to me. And now I had. I felt the anger swell inside me again, this time mixed with something else. Fear. Fear of what would happen next. Fear of how he might retaliate. Fear of what my father would say when he found out the truth. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth was out. The fight had begun, and there was no turning back. The moment I said those words, "I'm done being afraid," I knew my life was about to change. The air in the room grew thick with tension. Father Cole took a step toward me, his hand raised in anger. "You think you can ruin me?" he snarled. "I'll make sure you regret this." But in that instant, something snapped inside me. It wasn't just the fear of retaliation. It wasn't just the fear of being exposed for what I had endured. It was the realization that this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when I could finally say no. When I could finally fight back. And I wasn't going to let him intimidate me anymore. I reached for the envelope I had hidden inside my bag. Proof of everything. A record of his corruption, his manipulation, his lies. It was more than just the notes I had written down. It was the ledger I had found in his office, the one that had detailed all the bribes, the money he had taken from my father in exchange for silence. Father Cole's face went pale when he saw the envelope. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, his voice shaking now. "You're making a huge mistake." But it was too late. The truth was out, and the consequences came quickly. I barely had time to process what had happened before the door to the rectory burst open, and my father rushed in, his eyes wide with shock. "What's going on here?" he demanded, looking from me to Father Cole. Father Cole's face contorted with rage, and he lunged toward my father, his hands shaking. "She's lying," he growled, his voice low and threatening. "She's trying to ruin me, Frank. Don't let her do this." But my father didn't move. He stood frozen, his eyes darting between me and the priest, his face pale with disbelief. And then it all came crashing down. My father's silence was deafening. The betrayal in his eyes was the last thing I had ever expected. He knew what Father Cole had done, and he had chosen to look the other way. He had chosen to protect his reputation, to protect the power that came with being associated with someone like Father Cole. "I didn't want to believe it," my father said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to believe you, Charlotte. But now I see." I didn't wait for him to finish. I turned to face Father Cole one last time. "The truth will come out," I said, my voice steady. "And you'll never be able to hide from it again." In the days that followed, everything changed. The town was shaken. The people who had once looked up to Father Cole as a man of God now saw him for what he truly was. My father, too, was forced to confront his actions, and the family's silence became its own form of complicity. The truth had been exposed, but the emotional toll it took on me was heavy. There was relief, yes, but there was also a deep sadness, a sense of loss. I had lost my trust in the people I had once relied on. My father, the man who had taught me to respect authority and to trust in the people who cared for me, had failed me. But as the days passed, I began to feel something else rising within me. Something I hadn't expected. Empowerment. I had faced the darkness, and I had survived it. I had taken control of my life, and though the road ahead would be hard, I was no longer afraid. I had taken the first step toward healing, and no one could take that from me. This was my fight. And I was going to win. The days after everything came crashing down were a blur. At first, it was all just noise. People talking, the whispers in the streets, the stares, the pointed fingers. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for someone to condemn me, waiting for me to break under the pressure of the truth I had exposed. But as the noise died down, something else took its place. Silence. It was a heavy silence, the kind that wraps around you and suffocates you, as if the world has turned its back on you. There was no easy way to escape it, no simple path back to who I had been before. I didn't know how to move forward, how to piece together a life after the destruction of everything I had known. I remember one night, sitting in the small room that used to be my childhood bedroom. The walls, once filled with the laughter of a family who had no idea of the storm brewing just beneath the surface, now seemed cold and distant. I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. It was hard to reconcile the girl I had been, the girl who had trusted and loved, with the woman I was now. A survivor, yes, but a woman who carried the weight of her scars every day. The emotional scars were the hardest to bear. They weren't always visible to the outside world, but they were there, etched deep into my soul. Every memory, every moment of betrayal played on an endless loop in my mind. I couldn't outrun them. There were times when I wished I could forget, when I wished that the past would just disappear. But the truth was I couldn't undo what had been done. The best I could do was learn how to live with it, how to heal despite the pain. It wasn't easy. There were days when the grief felt unbearable, when the shame would crawl back into my thoughts and make me question everything I had done. But then, there were moments of clarity, moments when I remembered what I had fought for, what I had survived. And those moments, however fleeting, gave me the strength to keep going. In the weeks and months that followed, I began to find a new rhythm in my life. I didn't know what healing looked like yet, but I started to take small steps toward it. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose how I moved forward, and I knew that I couldn't stay trapped in the prison of my own mind. I had to break free, to rebuild, to find some semblance of peace in the chaos. One of the first steps I took was reaching out to others, those who had been through similar pain, those who had suffered in silence like I had. I had no idea how to be a mentor, no idea how to help others when I was still so broken myself. But as I met more people who had been victims of abuse, I realized something profound. I wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, my story could help someone else find their own strength, their own voice. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, talking to young women who had been through what I had. I didn't have all the answers, but I didn't need to. Sometimes just knowing that someone else had survived, that someone else had made it through the storm, was enough. I shared my story with them. Not in full detail, not all the painful parts, but just enough to let them know that I understood. I understood the fear, the shame, the silence, but I also understood the power of taking control, of finding your own path to healing. The road to rebuilding trust was a slow one. I didn't trust anyone at first. Not my father, not my family, not even myself. How could I? The people I had trusted most had failed me. The one man I had trusted to protect me, to keep me safe, had betrayed me in the worst way. And my father, the man who should have been my protector, had looked away. At first I couldn't even look at him without feeling a surge of anger and betrayal. How could he have known what was happening and not stopped it? How could he have let me go through that and then stood by Father Cole's side? But over time, I began to realize something I hadn't wanted to face. My father wasn't just a man who had failed me. He was a man who was broken too. He had been blinded by his own faith, by his need to believe in the good in people, even when it wasn't there. And while that didn't excuse what he had done, it allowed me to see that he too had been a victim of manipulation. It wasn't easy to forgive him, but as the days passed, I learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the wrongs done to me. It was about freeing myself from the weight of that anger. It was about letting go of the past and making room for something else, something healing, something that allowed me to move forward. I started with small steps, allowing myself to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I stumbled, when the fear of being hurt again threatened to overwhelm me. But I began to realize that trust wasn't something that could be given to others. It was something I had to give to myself first. I had to trust that I was strong enough to protect myself, to make the right choices, to stand up for myself when I needed to. And slowly, trust began to rebuild. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like flipping a switch. But day by day, I learned to open myself up again. I learned to let people in, to believe that not everyone was out to hurt me. And most importantly, I learned that I could be my own protector. I could trust myself. The hardest part of healing, though, was learning to trust that I could be loved again. I didn't know if I would ever be able to love someone fully, not without the fear that they might hurt me too. But in time, I realized that love wasn't just about giving. It was also about receiving. It was about allowing myself to be seen for who I truly was. Not just a survivor, but a person worthy of love, of kindness, of respect. I found this through small moments. I found it in the friends I made, in the family members who came to support me, in the people who looked at me not as a victim, but as a whole person, someone who had a past, but also had a future. As I learned to trust myself, I also began to find peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that meant forgetting what had happened. It was the kind of peace that meant accepting the scars, understanding that they were part of who I was, but that they didn't define me. They were reminders of what I had overcome, of what I had survived. Healing is never a straight line. It's a winding road, full of bumps and detours. But every step I took, no matter how small, brought me closer to the woman I was meant to be. I learned that I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to have all the answers. All I had to do was keep going, one step at a time. And so, I walked. I walked into a new chapter of my life, one where I wasn't just a survivor, but a woman who had reclaimed her power. As I sat on my porch, watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer held power over me. I had broken free, and now I could live my life on my own terms. I had learned that redemption wasn't about being perfect. It was about accepting your flaws, your mistakes, and your scars, and still choosing to live fully, to love deeply, to be yourself. And that, in the end, was all the redemption I needed. I've lived many lives in my time. The girl who grew up in that small town. The girl who trusted the wrong people. The woman who learned to fight for herself. And the grandmother who found peace in the quiet moments of life. Each of these lives shaped me, and each chapter in my story has a purpose. It was not always clear to me, and it certainly wasn't easy, but I see now that every struggle, every betrayal, and every victory led me to this place, to the woman I am today. Now, as I sit here in the evening light, with my grandchildren's laughter filling the house, I can't help but reflect on how far I've come. It seems like a lifetime ago that I was the scared little girl, sitting in the darkness, afraid of the man who had claimed my innocence. But I have made peace with the past. It's a part of me, a part of my journey. It doesn't define me anymore, and it no longer holds power over me. I carry the scars, yes, but I wear them with pride. They are reminders of my survival, of my strength, and of my ability to rise, even when it seemed impossible. I share my story now, not because it's easy, but because I know there are others out there who need to hear it. I know there are women and men who are still trapped by their past, by their circumstances, by their fears. I know what it's like to feel like you're suffocating, to feel like no one will believe you, to feel like you're all alone in the world. But I also know this: you are never truly alone. I used to think I had to fight alone. I thought that no one would understand. that no one would be able to help me, that I had to carry the weight of my pain in silence. But I was wrong. The first step to healing is realizing that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on others, to find support, to seek out the people who will stand beside you, who will fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. That was something I had to learn, something I had to discover in the hardest way possible. Sharing my story isn't just about me. It's about all of us who have been broken by the world and have found the strength to rebuild ourselves. It's about showing the world that even in the darkest of times, there is a way forward. There is always hope, even when it feels impossible to find. There are still days when the scars ache, when the past tries to creep back in and remind me of the girl I used to be. But those days are fewer now. The more I talk about it, the more I share my truth. The lighter the burden feels. The more I reach out to others, the more I realize that healing is a journey we can walk together. No one should have to walk it alone. I've learned to forgive, not just the people who hurt me, but also myself. For years, I carried the weight of guilt and shame, as if it were my fault, as if I had done something wrong. But the truth is, I was never to blame. The things that happened to me were not my fault. And once I realized that, once I accepted that I had nothing to be ashamed of, I began to heal in ways I never thought possible. I share this story with you now because I want you to know that if I can survive, so can you. If I can rebuild my life, so can you. And if you're still struggling, if you're still fighting to find your way out of the darkness, just know that there is hope. You are stronger than you realize. You are worthy of love, of peace, of happiness, and you don't have to fight alone. As I look at the life I've built, I can honestly say that I am proud of who I've become. I am proud of the woman who stood up to her abuser, who faced the truth no matter how painful, and who chose to rebuild instead of retreating into the past. I am proud of the grandmother I've become. The woman who now holds her grandchildren in her arms and tells them stories not of fear, but of strength, of survival, and of the power of forgiveness. But even with all the healing, even with all the peace I've found, I know that I will never forget. The scars will always be there, and they're a part of who I am. They remind me of where I came from and how far I've come. They remind me that even in the darkest of times, I survived. And that's the message I want to leave you with today. No matter what you've been through, no matter how many times you've fallen, you can rise again. You can heal. You can find peace. But it starts with you. It starts with your willingness to face the truth, to confront the darkness, and to believe that you are worthy of something better. I'm not here to tell you that healing is easy. It's not. It's a long, hard road, but it is worth it. And you don't have to walk it alone. If my story has resonated with you, if you've ever felt the weight of the past trying to pull you back, I want you to know that you are not alone. I encourage you to share your own story, to take the first step toward healing. Comment below and let me know how you fought for your survival. What has helped you find your strength? What obstacles have you overcome? Let's create a space where we can support each other, where we can lift each other up. And if you're ready to continue on this journey of survival, healing, and hope, please subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of people who understand, who know what it's like to feel broken, but who also know what it's like to rebuild, to rise, and to thrive. Together, we can make sure that no one ever feels alone in their pain again. Because no matter what you've been through, your story is not over. Your journey is just beginning. As I sit here, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of gold and pink, I reflect on the life I've lived. It hasn't been an easy journey. In fact, there were times when I thought the weight of my past would crush me. Times when I felt like I could never escape the shadows of the things that had been done to me. But here I am, stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I ever thought possible. There were days when I didn't know if I could go on. Days when the pain felt like it would swallow me whole. When the memories of betrayal and fear threatened to drown me. But what I learned through every moment of hardship was that resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time, no matter how hard it is. It's about finding the strength to move forward, even when it feels like the world is pushing you backward. And yes, there were times when I felt like giving up. But every time I was knocked down, I found a way to rise again. Sometimes it was with the help of others, and sometimes it was just sheer willpower. But I always found a way to rise, and that's the key to surviving, to overcoming, to reclaiming your power. You see, life will never be perfect. There will always be challenges. There will always be moments that test you, that push you to your breaking point. But it's in those moments of struggle that your true strength is born. It's when life gets hard that we discover just how much we are capable of enduring and how much we can grow. If you're going through a tough time right now, I want you to remember this. You are stronger than you think. No matter what you're facing, no matter how dark the path seems, there is always a way through. You have the strength inside you to overcome. I know because I've been there. I've faced the darkest moments and come out on the other side, not unscathed, but stronger. Your past doesn't define you. It shapes you, yes, but it doesn't determine your future. You have the power to create your own story, to rewrite the narrative that life has handed you. Don't let the hardships of your past dictate how you move forward. Let them fuel your fire. Let them become the foundation for your strength. It's never too late to reclaim your power. It's never too late to heal. I am living proof of that. The scars of the past may always be with me, but they no longer hold the power they once did. I choose to move forward, to live with purpose, to help others, and to remind myself every single day that I am capable of great things. So, if you're in the middle of your own struggle, if life has knocked you down more times than you care to count, just know this: you are not alone. There is a community of people, just like you, who understand, who have been through their own battles, and who have found the strength to overcome. We are all in this together, and together we will rise. No matter how tough life gets, you can always find a way through. Your strength, your resilience, your hope, it's inside you right now, waiting to be unleashed. The choice is yours. Will you let the darkness define you? Or will you rise above it and reclaim your light? I've walked that road. I've faced the storms. And I can tell you from experience, you can do this. You can rise. You can reclaim your power. The road ahead may not always be easy, but it will always be worth it. So, take that first step, and know that no matter how hard it gets, you've already proven that you have what it takes to keep going. Keep fighting. Keep moving forward. And always remember, you are stronger than you know.